Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. We're very, very excited to show you a Ripple 2.0. Sorry, everybody's just kind of coming in now. I can see it kind of jumping on the right-hand side here, which is awesome. Um, we can have a little chat away, Kieran, I guess, while the guys are kicking off. Kieran was at the Esri UK conference yesterday. Did you like anything jump out at you? I know you're at the Irish one as well there the week before, so you've been definitely around. Anything jump out to you that's kind of new and exciting?
Yeah, it was fairly similar to be honest. Kind of somewhat of the same material, but sort of refactored into a bit of a UK flavor. I did see a really interesting presentation by Coop or Co-op, however you pronounce it. I'm not quite sure, the supermarket chain. So they were showing some really cool stuff about how they're using ArcGIS to kind of manage that really fast, short delivery cycle, with the UK being obviously so big on their convenience food and meal deals to you in a second.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Sorry, it's my first time using Teams here. I just realized I think I have to click these buttons to make this kind of come into the box here briefly, but I can turn it off anyway when we get into presentation mode. So yeah, I can see we've got quite a good few attendees there now, which is awesome. Still people kind of coming in. But we can kick off because again, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So yeah, again, thank you for joining today's webinar. Kieran is going to kind of take us through what's changed in Ripple. I was very, very fortunate in the IMGS team, Data Builders team, to get a sneak peek of this a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, it's almost a reimagining now, and I don't want to steal any of your thunder, which I always do, Kieran, which I won't. But again, it's a real kind of reimagining of the platform to make it, I suppose, more sustainable as the Esri platform changes, but also to incorporate all the power of what FME Flow can be and that kind of lineage and discovery on both sides of the tools. And you never know, might be more in the future. So I'm going to hand over to Kieran, who is going to kind of take us through it. In terms of a platform, it's both our first times using Teams for a webinar, but there is a Q&A section. I think there's a chat, etc. So please don't be afraid to ask a couple of questions. John Hawkins is already making fun of me as usual. Nothing new there. So, but yeah, yeah, absolutely, Kieran. I'm going to hand over to yourself. I'm going to take myself off screen, or do you want to stay on screen?
You feel free to jump off. I might jump off as well, actually, just
Okay, sure.
to sort of, yeah. Awesome. Hey, thanks for joining us, everyone. Yeah, appreciate your time and interest in checking out the Ripple platform. This is our first release webinar, so you're the very first people in the world to see this platform. So yeah, very exciting times, and thanks again for joining us. And yeah, cheers for that intro and for hosting us, Garrett and the team at IMGS Data Builders. So I'll just take you through a quick agenda of what we're going to cover today. First of all, I'll give you a bit of an introduction about who we are, the team at Ripple. And then if you are joining us for the first time, if this is your first time encountering Ripple, I will just give you a quick recap on the challenge that we have seen in the geospatial industry, and as a result, the solution that we are providing with Ripple, and then just take you through some of the features, be it the old ones or the new ones, to show you what Ripple is offering. And then lastly, we'll just close out with a quick close on who Ripple's been designed for. So who we are, this is me. I'm Kieran, the founder of Ripple. I'm a GIS developer turned FME consultant from New Zealand. I've been working as a FME consultant for, I think, close to the last 10 years now, and really kind of that specialist or that kind of niche I've found myself in is working across FME and ArcGIS, because obviously we know that those two work hand in hand to actually, to form your GIS ecosystem, if you like. So yeah, for the last almost 10 years, I've been building integrations and working in this industry across Australasia and then more recently in Europe, as I'm now based out of Barcelona. So fortunately, got a friendly time zone to be speaking with you today. So a little bit about Ripple. We're a New Zealand company. We have a growing customer base across New Zealand, Australia, and Europe, and we are supported by our fantastic partner network for that localized expertise. Obviously, it's great to have a local partner such as IMGS Data Builders that you can work with and trust to get that immediate support when you need it. Yeah, and our focus is basically on building the best software platform we can to make GIS admin less of a grind, to put it very simply. I've seen a lot of these challenges over the years working in this space, and just, sometimes it just feels like it's a lot more difficult than it should be to get our jobs done. So really Ripple is helping to sort of, simplify a lot of these challenges and just make the whole process a lot easier. So the big challenge that we have here is that GIS platforms are deeply interconnected. So a single change that you want to make can ripple across hundreds of items in your ecosystem. We sort of see this content sprawl. As GIS professionals, we're responsible for not just maintaining, one or two applications, but this huge number of solutions that service all sort of different areas of the businesses that we work for. So it kind of has this house of cards effect, where if you make a small change somewhere, that impact is just going to ripple out everywhere. The other challenge is that content has been built over such a long period of time. Often that's been done quickly, maybe without the appropriate documentation or handover, that it really is a challenge to kind of maintain these long-standing platforms. And the other challenge to that is that when we do find connections between content, whether it's between a data set and a workspace or an app to a map, often that connection is only visible, in one direction. So you can't start at any sort of object or item in your GIS ecosystem and know how it's interrelated accurately. You can maybe see in one direction, but you often can't go that other way. If we look at this from an ArcGIS perspective, this is a very simple breakdown of, how you might build a solution with layers, services, maps, and apps. This one direction visibility sort of works. If we looked at a web experience, we could, with a bit of difficulty, a bit of effort, we could figure out the maps that it uses, and from a map, figure out the services and the layers that are being consumed. So, that's possible. But if we come at it from that other direction, we can't really see things going the other way. So we can, understand the relationships between a layer and a service, but there's ultimately no way to figure out, how a service, what maps are consuming a service, or what services are being consumed by an application, or what maps are being referenced. Sorry, if you're looking at a map, you can't figure out which apps are using it. And that presents a real challenge for administrators. If we extend that even further, I guess the bigger challenge is that data doesn't start in ArcGIS. For most GIS teams, it originates in FME and then flows into ArcGIS. FME and ArcGIS work together to form your GIS. It's not sort of a one or the other situation. It's basically this kind of, this puzzle that fits together, where FME and ArcGIS work together in order to, create this whole system. So other parts of that ecosystem are workspaces, automations, schedules, and data sets, and how those fit into the picture, as well as other things like, connections to databases or web services, which provide your authentication. And without that visibility of both, you're only really seeing half the picture. So that looks a lot more complicated. If we sort of break it down and how those connect, we can see there we've actually got further upstream, we have this whole other part of the puzzle, which is FME, how a workspace actually writes to data sets, which actually connects into the ArcGIS ecosystem, how that workspace is being triggered, whether it's via an automation or a schedule, whether you've built a nice workspace app, which allows a user to run a workspace, that cross-platform relationship visibility is extremely important. So the solution we have is Ripple, one platform with complete visibility. Everything about your ArcGIS and everything about your ArcGIS and FME environments go into one place. We surface all of those hidden dependencies that would be very challenging, if not impossible, to find otherwise, and see how those two platforms relate, both within those platforms and across the platforms. We also have these new features as far as platform level reporting. That's really built to assist you with justifying your spend and making sure that you can demonstrate your value to stakeholders. Ripple runs entirely on your own environment, so it's it's been built and designed to run specifically on FME Flow. So it gets deployed directly onto FME Flow via a project file. This was a really important design consideration for us because we know how hard it is to get new software installed. Going through that whole architecture process to stand up a new virtual machine, poke another hole in the firewall, that kind of thing is a very challenging thing to get across. And so what we wanted to do was build Ripple to be self-sufficient on the platforms that you already use. So you essentially deploy Ripple onto FME Flow. It connects into ArcGIS to perform a really detailed amount of discovery. And then that data is then stored within your FME Flow environment, making sure it all stays secure. Nothing ever leaves your existing environment. It's all, contained within your own network. So the new features that we have, first of all, I'll touch on ArcGIS content. So ArcGIS content is all about deep discovery at a glance. Rather than having to go sort of looking or searching for the stuff that you need, we bring it right to your fingertips. So whether that's sort of first identifying an item that exists in ArcGIS, whether you're looking for the metadata or whether you're looking for those immediate relationships that connect one item to another. We make it very simple to search, filter, and sort to make sure that you can find what you're looking for, and then also flick between different environments just with the click of a button. So I'm just going to go through each of the features and flip between demos. So hopefully stay with me. Yep, cool. I can see you on screen there. Okay, so this is the new and improved interface of Ripple. So here we have the landing page. When you enter Ripple, you'll see a really simple UI to allow you to get to the different platforms. So we'll start with ArcGIS content and navigate to that. So here you'll see a full a whole list of all of your content that lives in the ArcGIS platform. We have these category filters. So if you're looking for sort of apps, maps, or services, it's very quick to just sort of chop and change and find what you're looking for. You can also sort by different categories and then also search really easily. So let's say I'm looking for things relating to traffic. I can see there it's gone and filtered to 9 items out of my 82. And we can see there everything relating to traffic has been made available to me. We also have filters, so you can get a little bit more, deep in the specifics of what you're looking for. Perhaps you're looking for exact content types, items that have been created by specific users. Maybe you're looking for things from a certain period in time, whether that's based on the create date or the modified date. Or also you may just be looking for things that have been actually shared and not interested in stuff that's sitting as, kind of dev in people's accounts. So it really helps to sort of, hone in on what you're looking for as a start point. Now, if we select an item here, I can see a little bit more details around the metadata. As we can see, I'm not particularly good at storing metadata about my own items, but that's the nature of my work. So we've got here the traffic counts time-enabled web map. And I can, expand on this and see different, features that might be important to me. So if we click on the direct relationships button, we'll get a list where we can see immediately all of the different, immediate relationships to an item. So I've got a web map and I can see instantly this is the web mapping application which is consuming this app. And then feeding that web map, I can see what feature layers are sort of, going into there. If I had shared this to groups, I'd be able to see what groups it's been shared with. And then also we have this new tool, which is version history. So again, I know version history is a bit challenging with something like ArcGIS Online because once you've made a change, you kind of can't get it back. So what Ripple now does is it automatically detects when a version has changed and it will store that JSON as a backup. So if you did need to perform a rollback or sort of look at one version next to another, we'll be storing that in the back end of Ripple so that you can go and retrieve the version history. And then, you have a bit of disaster recovery or just a little bit more, security around maybe the loss of content, hopefully. Okay, now getting into FME content. So what we provide with FME now is that same clarity, but for your FME environments. What we've done with FME is make everything that sort of exists in that FME platform surfaced and searchable. So rather than it being buried deeply within workspaces, hopefully you're able to find that because you have that institutional knowledge, but that isn't always the case. So what we've tried to do is, basically bring everything we can out of the FME platform into a way that you can interact with it and find, those simple, I guess, what should be simple things like the item itself and then how that relates to other things. So naturally, an FME workspace is always going to be at the center of things, but there are other like adjacent items, like it being triggered via an automation or a schedule, or it using a particular web connection to provide authentication. And then in addition to that, we have other things which aren't really, I guess, items in FME, but they are relationships as well. So you can see here things like a job. So when did the workspace last run? A data set, which might be a reader or a writer to or from the workspace. And then other things which are quite challenging to find in I guess, in an automated fashion, but integration transformers like an emailer or an HTTP caller, things like that, which, it helps us to see where they exist in the platform. So if I jump back across to Ripple now, to switch from ArcGIS to FME, I just use that navigation panel on the side, and I jump into FME. Here we can see I've also got the ability to switch between my different flow environments. For now, I'm going to stay in the Ripple flow environment. But yeah, if I want to then find content that exists in FME, again, we have that categorization. Perhaps I'm looking for workspaces. Maybe I'm looking for specific data sets. That's always an interesting one to look into. But if I'm looking for particular data sets, I can find that. I'll stick with the workspace because that tends to be the most interesting. And I'll play off that earlier example before. So here I have a workspace called Roads WFS to AGOL. Fortunately, my titling gives me a pretty good indication of what this workspace does. If we select that, we get a little bit of metadata about it. But again, we see these direct relationships. So if I pop that open, I can see that this workspace exists in the ArcGIS repository. It belongs in an automation, so that indicates to me the trigger is this traffic app automation. And there we can see we've got a WFS layer and then a connection to an ArcGIS feature layer as well. And here I can see we've got this web connection. So that web connection is ultimately what's providing the authentication. So I know that it has this dependency in order for this workspace to run correctly. I can also see recent jobs. So when did this workspace trigger? Looking at this, I can see that it's probably scheduled to run at about 10:30 p.m. every night, and it has a variation of about 5 minutes. If I then wanted to jump straight into the log, I could click this button and it's going to pop open FME Flow and take me straight to the log file for that job so that I can look at it further. Of course, that's not so important if it's a success, but very, very helpful if it is a failure, I think. Again, with version history, this is another one that I think we always struggle to get right with FME, but we do take backups of those workspaces. So if we detect that a workspace has been updated between yesterday and today, we will take another copy of that workspace and store it in the back end of Ripple so that if you need to, you can just go ahead and download that workspace and you've got the sort of copies of those, of those workspaces.
While you're on the topic, Kieran, one of the questions that came
Yeah.
in was how do you, can you explain a little bit more around that kind of versioning storage and how it's triggered?
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as ArcGIS is concerned, there's a modified date. And so if we'll detect that the version that ArcGIS now has is newer than the version that Ripple has, it will take another copy of it. So it will make sure that, essentially, Yeah, it will just take a copy of that newer version. At the moment, we don't have anything where you can interact with it in the Ripple interface, but that is something on the roadmap. Wasn't planning on touching on the roadmap just today with a new version, but that is something that we'd like to be able to offer more of, is being able to identify what those differences are, and then also extending that even further so that you do have sort of this rollback behavior, which maybe can allow you to sort of perform these, automated rollbacks is probably the best example I have to use. Um, as far as FME is concerned, that's sometimes a little bit trickier. With workspaces, naturally, those are the most important to be performing the version history on. We'll take that same approach where we'll detect that, the workspace has been updated between, it was updated. It was first published on the 28th, or this was the first time Ripple was made aware of this workspace. On the 10th, we could see it, it had been updated. And so on that date, when we re-performed that discovery, we found that the workspace was newer than what Ripple knew about. So we now have the most up-to-date version instead. Yeah, as well as.
Another question just popped in there. With FME data connections, can we tell if it is a read or a write? Also, does it pick up feature reader and writers as well as transformer feature readers and writers?
Yes, great questions. So it picks up readers, writers, feature readers, feature writers. I think it also, there are a handful of transformers it also works with. I think it's the database joiner, because that effectively has some sort of read capability in there as well. So it does pick up a database joiner. I'm trying to think if there's another transformer. I'd have to get back to you on that one. In terms of the readers and writers, in this interface, it doesn't show you which of them is which, but at a point later in the demonstration, you will see how it does indicate which one's a reader and which one's a writer. In this case, it's more of a catalog, as to say that this is an item, which is a relationship, but in this interface, it doesn't indicate what that relationship is, if that makes sense.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kieran.
No worries. And then another feature, of course, we've got these filters, but we also have, it's much the same as the ArcGIS, but this handy feature, which is something I've always struggled with, is trying to track down emails or trying to track down Python in workspaces. So we've built this in to indicate where there's an integration transformer has been used. So perhaps you're looking for all of your workspaces that contain a Python script. I can see here this uses a Python caller. And I can select that workspace, look at the integration transformers and see, okay, there's 2 Python callers inside here. That tells me a little bit about the workspace. Or perhaps if I'm looking for HTTP callers, that might indicate to me that this is maybe an API sort of related workflow. Strava, that's a classic one. So it's only got one HTTP caller, but yeah, it does give you a pretty good indication of what's happening inside the workspace as well, because it is notoriously difficult to figure out what those integration transformers actually do. A Python caller and there could be doing anything. It could be calling a complete another data set that we don't know about because we can't pick it up as an item in the same way that we can with a reader or a writer. So having that ability to identify integration transformers is, I guess, another part of that puzzle.
Sorry, Kieran, another question came in there.
Yeah,
does Ripple only show and explore the content on ArcGIS online, or does it also bring in from enterprise? Well, I know the answer to that, but I'll let you answer.
Perfect. It works equally well with both. You just see my example as always ArcGIS online because that's what I have access to, but it works equally well with both online and ArcGIS Enterprise.
And we've had customers that have multiple instances where they might have a US instance and they still haven't maybe migrated over to the EU. So again, where you could use Ripple to help kind of with that almost audit trail to say what was there, have we copied everything over, is it worth copying over, is it being used, etc. So really, really powerful in those scenarios. And some customers, especially the larger utilities, will have like a pre-production and production. So again, you can have these multiple tabs and you can kind of navigate across through the different platforms where you need to go.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Garrett. So it works really well because you can just flick between, imagine this was, production or just ArcGIS Online and then production portal, you'll be able to sort of interact with those as their own sort of, I guess, catalogs of data, if you like, or catalogs of content. And then when that relationship, or I haven't actually shown that feature yet, when you're looking at the relationships, though, it will work across multiple platforms, because I know, it's not always this clean delineation between what's in Portal and what's in AGO. Often you consume services that cross over platforms. So if you've licensed it for multiple, you'll be able to see where that content does cross over from one to the other. And that leads me to my next topic, which is cross-platform relationships. So yeah, this is all about relationship mapping across the platforms. So I've shown you so far the immediate dependencies, but I guess that's the first challenge. What really gets difficult is where we have these nested layers of connections. And so what Riffle does is it traces these nested layers of dependencies or connections automatically. And this, works both across ArcGIS and FME. So it becomes really powerful because you can see the full chain from sort of the source of something all the way to how it actually reaches the end user. This used to take hours and hours of manual digging, but now it takes seconds to just generate a report and very quickly understand how your whole kind of solution fits together. So you're in for a treat. We'll go straight to another demo. So here we go back into that same example I was using before. I'll just start with going to traffic, and we'll look at that traffic counts time-enabled web map. So here we've obviously seen those immediate dependencies, but where it is very powerful is if we hit this view relationships button. So we click on that. Doesn't load as fast on Teams. I can see the lag there, but I promise you it's nice and smooth on my computer. What we can see here is we have this full, I guess, like networks diagram, if you like, where we can see the item that we began with was that web map, and those immediate relationships are all of those feature layers which are surrounding the web map and have this direct connectivity. So that's our first layer of dependency. However, if we zoom out a bit further, we can then see, what does this feature layer connect to in terms of the service? Or what does this feature layer connect to in terms of service? But then where it becomes really valuable is where we cross over all the way to a different platform, with that platform being FME. So here I can see that actually the source of one of the data sets within this web application is this workspace, the Roads WFS to AGOL workspace that we looked at before, with that authentication and that automation which is triggering it. So we can go all the way through from a kind of front-end application, see the map, see the service, and then we can see the workspace which updates the service. And even at this point, we can see the data set which is actually feeding into that workspace as well. So jumping back to one of those questions before around which is a reader and which is a writer. So the data set was one that showed up as an immediate relationship, but we can see based on that arrow, we can see which one is the reader and which one is the writer, because of course a reader is going to be feeding into a workspace, whereas a writer is going to be coming out of the workspace. Again, we have some more features that just help make this a little bit clearer depending on what you're trying to look at. So you may not always be trying to get that full picture of how a complete thing forms together or how the whole solution works. So what we can do is sort of filter based on, if you're only looking at ArcGIS at the moment, you can turn off FME. You could just look at FME and see how FME fits into the picture. In this case, we'll look at both, or you can split that out based on categorization or based on specific types of content. That's something we noticed from our first round of the Ripple release, is that I often work in a smaller development environment, but seeing the experience with some of our customers where you've just got hundreds or thousands of items which do really cross over each other, we wanted to improve that user experience for you to make sure that you could, hone in on what you're looking for at a particular time, because you aren't always trying to understand that complete picture. Sometimes it's about maybe removing a specific dependency or just identifying, certain elements of that picture at any one time. We can also just sort of only show what we've selected. So, hide different elements on the canvas. We've also built this feature to make it really easy to create sort of not quite an architecture diagram, but a solution diagram. So here we can sort of freeze everything and really lay out a picture that makes it easy to understand how a solution works. So here we've got, layers in one layer, which then feeds to, I should probably turn the services back on, which then shows you how services relate all the way through to, apps and maps. So being able to build that kind of diagram to clearly articulate how a solution works is also helpful, as well as things like, just legends and helpful tools to make it easier to navigate. You can also go ahead and download this report and it'll generate you a CSV file of all of those relationships, which you can then take away and sort of work through if you do want to go make some changes to the platform. Again, if we come at this from another direction, we could be looking for something completely different. So if we come at this from an FME side of things, perhaps I'm looking for web connections. Web connections are one of those things that are hard to figure out where they exist in workspaces right now. So I could look at, say, this web connection, which is my Ripple AGOL connection. I can open that up and see immediately which workspaces are being used. And then if I wanted to look at relationships from this side of things, we're going to get quite a different picture in this scenario. We lay that out, I get this kind of, I don't know, firework pattern, I guess, not sure. But we can see here we've got, a web connection at the center of things. If I'm looking for the workspaces that relates to, I can see which workspaces are using that web connection. But then those sort of nested layers of connections are really, really powerful as well, because I can see not only which workspaces use the connection, but ultimately where does that data end up? How that, what's actually connected to this web connection are these feature layers. And in this situation, what's the actual end application which is consuming those services or those feature layers? So ultimately, if this connection was deleted, or let's say the token starts to expire because we haven't refreshed it, effectively these end sort of connections are our services, and then our actual users of apps who are going to be impacted if that object isn't functioning correctly. So yeah, it's always different depending on the sort of angle that you're coming at it from, whether you're looking at it from an app or whether you're looking at it from a data set or from a connection. But it does give you that real flexible approach to make sure that you can scope a change well and see what you need to with those cross-platform relationships.
And I'd seen report there as well. Sorry, Kira, before you jump on, this is kind of one of the questions kind of touches on this, which we'll cover at the end. But you can then report on that. So again, having that visual interface is amazing, but you can also click that report button that you were just in there and kind of download it, which is actually feedback that we got off one of the Northern utilities, where it'd be great to kind of, we still all love Excel and HTML and all these kind of refinements, to kind of pull it out and still kind of step through, okay, I'm migrating this workspace or I'm deprecating or whatever. I just want to make sure I've taken everything off or I've moved it, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so if you are trying to say remove a dependency or, like you say, deprecate something, you can go ahead, work through that report, make sure you've made the changes. The next time Ripple triggers to go and update, you're going to get a completely new picture. So you'll be able to then validate your work and actually make sure, did we remove that dependency on this particular item we had? You'll be able to go and run that report again and see, yep, it isn't connected to anything in the way that it was before. So you kind of have that before and after kind of feedback loop, which is, fantastic.
And just because you touched on it there, with the triggering, again, it's set obviously up with an FME flow, so a customer can set whatever interval they want, or they can manually go in and kick it off to re-trigger if they need to. Because also, again, I'm just conscious of stuff that people have asked before that will probably come up in the chat.
Perfect. Alrighty, and then so to touch on a few more topics, we've really expanded the reporting offering that Ripple has, and that's largely been due to customer demand as well. So what we've tried to focus on, is metrics that matter but are hard to find. So there's a couple of things here that we wanted to focus on, and quality and reliability is a big one for GIS, especially because it is such a interconnected system that's hard to maintain. So the broken links report is a really powerful tool that we've created in order to let you see where you've got or where you've got items that aren't working exactly as they should be. So a broken link is something where you've maybe, let's say you had a map and it's referenced a service, but that service no longer exists. What we do is we create this report where it effectively identifies where that service has been referenced and tells you that that map is still looking for it. So it really helps from the quality and reliability perspective. We also tried to improve the, ability for you to find good usage information, which is quite challenging, I think. So we track user logins so that you can see who's actually making use of the licenses that you're paying for. And also we have some view count reporting too, so that you're able to see what services or what applications in your organization are being used. So you can really justify improving them, or perhaps on the opposite side of that, if you're looking to see if you can remove content because it's draining credits, that view count reporting helps you to see that. And then we also have some other things to help you with cost. So I know that content storage and credit usage is a big one. I myself actually used my own report the other day to see that I'd been, inserting data over and over again to the same system, to the same service, and it was just growing and costing me hundreds of credits a month. So yeah, being able to really sort of easily identify what items are kind of costing you credits in that space. So I'll give you a quick demo of that now. With ArcGIS, we'll navigate to the reporting panel, and we'll pop that open, and I can see here, if I go to the overview tab, we've got a nice overview report which indicates just the sort of, total items that we have in the platform. So you can see my platform's very small, but got 82 items, which is split by 16 apps, 6 maps, and 17 services, a whole bunch of other content which isn't captured there. We then get some usage statistics, so we can see, what's the overall view count in the platform, how many new items have been created, how many have been modified recently, and then also some user metrics to see, what's our user count, who's been active and who's been inactive, and then a few things around quality and maintenance. So are there any broken links that we need to fix? What external content are we referencing? And then sort of from a metadata perspective, are we being good with tagging items or providing summaries or description? As we can see, I am not. I'm just going to jump across to a different app right now, just because I have had to create some content for this specifically, because my content is nowhere near interesting enough to look at. So in this case, I've got a content storage report. Here I can see the content storage overall, how much, total, storage space are we using, what that's split across based on the number of items, and then how many credits are we presuming to, are we estimating that we're going to consume per month based on the content that we have in place right now. We can scroll down and we can see here the different items which are consuming that content or credits. So the different items, we can see their size, and then how many credits that's actually going to, cost us to store that item. If I look across at a different organization, so the NZTA is the New Zealand Transport Association. They have a huge amount of content up here, about 11 gigs worth, and you can see particular items like their motor vehicle register is large, and it's going to cost about 744 credits per month. So that ability to really quickly identify, the cost of something and the true cost of something is very helpful to, just target our efforts and make sure we're aware of what's actually going on in the platform. Again, we could also look at this not just based on the type of content, but we could also look at different users. So here we can see, they're using an organizational user pretty much all of the time, but there's also maybe one personal user who's slipped through there. They're obviously not creating too much content, but that is also very helpful for you to be able to identify maybe there's a sort of training opportunity with some of our users who maybe don't register the relationship between what they've published and what that's going to cost. Just being able to quickly get that identification of what's happening in the platform at a glance is, I think, very helpful. Looking at it from a licensing and usage perspective, of course, I don't have access to the NZTA user login data with good reason, but I do have some user logins here that I have generated. So we have this ability to just identify who our users are, what sort of licenses they're using, what licenses we have, and then the sort of total the total logins that we're seeing per day based on the total number as well. So that's, I think, a helpful, just way to identify who's actually using that platform. We can break it down based on week or month, so we can see spikes in usage of the platform. Maybe if we're campaigning to try and get people to use the services more, we can see if that's working, or whether there's certain days or certain periods that, we get that information more. We can also look at it based on particular users, which I think is helpful if you do have users with certain license types, which I know are more expensive than others. I see the licensing model has changed a little bit with Esri recently as well. So Creator isn't even the top one anymore. They've gone for 2 levels higher. So naturally that cost is going to add up of what it costs to use some of these license types. So being able to identify particular users and see, what's the gap between how often they're actually logging in. If you've got creators, or I think it's advanced now, which is the highest, and they're not logging in for 27 days at a time, it's perhaps some good rationalization for what license type they may actually need. And we can also look at view counts. So if we're trying to identify items which are being used or not used in the platform, whether that's breaking it down by the different type of content we have, or whether it's looking at specific items to see how many view counts. Obviously, one of the demos that I had been using for the version 1 of Ripple, still not very many. But again, if I looked at the NZTA, there we go, and we look at that, based on the different type of content, what are the sort of daily hits that's getting? I've still got the filter from the last one. If we look at the top 5 items in their platform, we can see, what's really generating the hits and how many daily hits do they get, which this is obviously a very popular web map for them. And there we go. And then lastly, that broken links report that I mentioned earlier. So this is a very powerful tool where we can see, an item. I can see obviously there's this 30-year plan baseline network version web experience, which has references to a lot of different items which we can't access. It indicates to me, since I'm not part of the organization, that maybe they've got some funky sharing going on where there is references to content that I just can't see without being logged in. But it would highlight to you, if I look at the Ripple one, I broke this map on purpose. So I had this map and I removed a feature layer from the platform, and we can then identify quickly, there's this item which used to exist and this web map is looking for. Ultimately, that tells us that this map needs updating to either remove the reference or to replace it with something that, is the correct service now. We can also see things like external content. So this isn't so much a broken item. It's just a kind of an awareness thing that you might be consuming content from a different ArcGIS organization. And it's not broken. It's just, I guess, a little bit of an awareness exercise that item is subject to change, and someone could remove it or unshare it, and it could be essentially something that breaks one of your own apps if that were to happen. So just being able to identify where those exist, I think, is pretty helpful. If we look at that for TFL, I can see there, they've got a web experience which is pulling in a what 3 words geocoding service. I know it's quite popular in the UK. Very helpful to identify those without having to go digging. Where am I? Yeah. All right, and last but not least, in terms of the demos, this is a short segment on the FME reporting. So our focus for the FME reporting has been about optimizing your platform. I know that engine utilization can sometimes be quite tricky to get right if you've got multiple engines. So we've created a engine utilization report to understand queuing and to help you make smarter scheduling decisions. We've also got a job calendar, which provides a really good visual map that allows you to see when jobs run so you can spot availability on your server at a glance. Sometimes the jobs endpoint or the jobs logs are not the most helpful way to see where you've got availability. And we also break that down right to a granular level of workspace runtime. So that helps you to identify high frequency or long running jobs. So if you are looking for optimizations, it will help you to prioritize those efforts and make sure you're going to get bang for buck out of any of the work you do. All right, so jumping into FME, we'll go to the reporting endpoint. Again, we can see some fairly straightforward metrics around the platform. I can see, how many workspaces do I have? I'm actually just going to change environments. Sorry, I'm in the wrong app now. Jump into this one, overview, and change, yes, to my Ripple flow environment. So yeah, we can see things like how many workspaces do I have? How many of those have been updated in the last 30 days? Number of automations running, perhaps the number of data sets that we're reading from or writing to in and out of FME. We can also see some high level metrics around the job performance. So in the last 30 days, how many jobs have run, what's the success rate, and therefore give you a pretty good indication on platform health. All right, if we go into the engine usage report, here you can see a really good breakdown of, I guess, like your engine utilization. So the default view is to break that down based on repository. So we can see there, which repositories are consuming, I guess, the most engine runtime. We could also look at that based on the users we have. Again, it's not really many of us up there. We could look at it based on source, so whether things are being triggered by automations, schedules, data virtualization, or workspace apps. Mine are all other, those are me manually running jobs. Or we could look at it based on the engine as well. So if you're working with multiple engines, just being able to see which ones are working hard and which ones are slacking off, that could also give you some good indications of how you can reprioritize those queues. You can also see around like engine usage stats. So mine's obviously a dev environment, so we don't get a lot of usage. But if we wanted to break things down and sort of look at, for most of us, we'll do our processing overnight because everyone's out of work. So it's an appropriate time to be updating data sets or updating applications. Maybe we want to break this down and just sort of look at things based on a 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock might be appropriate. And you can see our engine usage updates in relation to that. So based on the overall amount of hours that we had, if our engines were running completely during that period, how much engine occupancy have we got there? Break it down, look at it based on different factors, of course, as well. And then if we wanted to look at particular workspaces, what we can see here is all of our workspaces and then the statistics that we have. So if we wanted to look at if we wanted to look for something like if we wanted to look for the highest, I guess, job frequency or the highest job executions, we could sort based on this. And here I can see that my Ripple content data virtualization job, of course, runs the most, but it only has an average, it has an average runtime of 0.0 minutes, and those 71 jobs make up a total of 2.1 minutes. So really, there's not a huge amount of room for optimization in that space. So perhaps we want to look at things maybe more based on the total runtime. And here I can see that I have this workspace which takes 22.7 minutes for a total runtime it's run for is 22 minutes. It does in the queue for quite some time, but the average runtime is still only 0.9 minutes. It just executes more frequently than a lot of them. So yeah, depending on what you're looking for, perhaps you're looking for how often things are queuing or how long they're queuing for, or perhaps you're looking for a CPU differential to see how long, how long something's downloading something from another service rather than actually running and processing data. It's all available to you in this report, and of course downloadable as well. And then we lastly have the jobs calendar, which is just a handy tool for something that I've always struggled with in FME, and that's finding the right time to schedule your job. You've got a new job which needs to run once a week, it has to run overnight. It's going to take 2.5 hours. When do I put it is the first question you've got. And so what we've built here is a way to identify your job logs on kind of a timeline. You can zoom in and see the jobs that are running. You can then just adjust your calendar. You could maybe build it up so you can see a full week's worth of views. So if we looked at, I don't know, maybe I want to look at Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and can't scroll far enough. Maybe another Wednesday anyway. Yeah, we can then compare this sort of on like a timeline, almost like kind of like scheduling assistant when you're trying to find a gap in everyone's calendar. And of course, if you then have multiple engines, and so you're trying to figure out which engine could actually run the job, those will appear as multiple engine sort of views there so that you can find the right time to program a job in. Maybe you want to compare one Sunday to the Sunday before. You just got a hunch that something was quite different. I'll just close those. And it looks like nothing ran last Sunday on my job calendar. I think that's just before I set this demo up, so there is nothing in there. Monday. Yeah. Anyway, you get the idea that it just gives you that ability to, I guess, identify where there are jobs and where there is availability so that you can get your scheduling dialed in. As good as you can. All right. So really just to close this off, I'm all done with the demos now. So you might be wondering who is Ripple for? And really it's built for everyone. We've built this with many roles in mind, whether you're sort of a tech lead, developer, a manager, team lead, business analyst, or perhaps someone more in the junior analyst sort of space. It's really been built for everyone to help, just all of these different sort of roles or these different tasks that you often have to do in GIS, whether it's trying to understand, and get good, quick oversight on your content, whether it's sort of error trapping, scoping a project, getting metrics, or whether you're working on help desk. I think there's something there for everyone, and we are trying to just simplify this whole process to hopefully just make life, hopefully make work feel a whole lot lighter and just simpler for these things that are often quite time consuming and really challenging tasks that I don't think always have to be. So with that in mind, I'm aware that I've probably taken up all of that time, Garrett. So is there any more time for Q&A or
No, there's always time for Q&A. I'll take off the main slides for now, and we can always kind of jump in as we need to. So a question just came in there, I suppose, does it run on Form? No, it runs on FME Flow or FME Flow hosted. So yeah, it needs that kind of level of power and automation to kind of have that level of functionality and to be able to kind of crawl and analyze. So so you need to have FME Flow or Flow hosted in order to have Ripple. Is it possible to identify a duplicate content? This would be valuable for data cataloging, as it would allow us to remove redundant or outdated content, which is a good question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I guess it's sort of possible. It ultimately comes down to what is your definition of duplication. And so like something called the same but has different data within it is ultimately something different. So it's a very tricky one to nail in and say that this identifies a duplicate. I guess what we're doing is trying to surface everything so that you can find it easier, and that will assist you with that duplication process. So if we take that example where I searched traffic before, and this always comes up in ArcGIS in particular, but if you were to search from the point of view of traffic and you look for feature services, you'll often see that there's two things there that are called the exact same thing. So that will identify duplicates for you. It will still be your, I guess, your role, or you'll have to take that next step to identify, is this a true duplicate or is this a false duplicate, and they're actually the same. They're different things that have been called very similar things. So yeah, that surfacing really helps you to do it, but there will still be that degree that you need to take to identify, is this a duplicate or not.
That data stewardship or domain knowledge to know that it is a duplicate. No, that's fine. The next one, and I think we've already answered it already, but can content feature service storage be broken down to split out by image storage, as this is a lot cheaper than the features themselves, but can be very big. And I think you already kind of showed that in that graph a little bit to a degree.
Yeah, so that one's a tricky one. I don't know that ArcGIS, I don't think ArcGIS supports it, unfortunately. So exactly right, that the feature service storage is a lot more significant than the attachment storage. So if you had a feature service which is storing attachments against the feature service, I believe they're calculated on a different cost of that storage, which is why it's an estimated cost up there, is that it does come down to the split there. If it's possible to break those two down, we will definitely support that. It's just whether ArcGIS exposes which is which. So we might be encountering a limitation there.
Lovely, thanks. The next one is, would it be it would be useful if you could diagram, so those diagrams could be printed to PDF or imported into Visio?
Ooh, that's a great question. I did consider a PDF tool at some point when I was going through this build process, and I'll note that one down for a future enhancement.
3.0, stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I could probably get it to 2.1, I reckon. It's not too challenging. The Visio one, I'm not sure. I haven't looked at how easy it is to get something into Visio, like if there's a specification that you can write to. Being Microsoft, my gut feel would be it's probably proprietary, but I will note that down as well into being able to turn that into a diagramming tool. Perhaps there's something like draw.io that we could work with, because it's a little bit more open with it being XML.
No, brilliant, lovely. There's a good few, so I'm going to keep flying through them if we can.
Cool.
Is it / would it be possible to color code highlight AGOL services that are on the user's AGOL / ArcGIS enterprise environment, and which ones are third party? Ooh, this is kind of a
That's in the backlog for the next release. So yeah, being able to identify visually, just put like a little halo around it to see, is this an AGOL? Is this an enterprise? Is this somewhere else? It's definitely coming.
Yeah, that's a great question. Can you identify when a source was last updated?
A source from yes, there's modified dates on everything in there. So if it's an ArcGIS, ooh, I will note that down and get back to you.
Okay.
It depends on which. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. Could you please, here we go. Haven't had my coffee. Could you please explain how Ripple integrates with ArcGIS Online? Is it through native capabilities, APIs, or connectors? And how can you ensure, sorry, let me expand this. How can you ensure ongoing compatibility with version updates, which is obviously something we've been through quite recently. So compatibility updates with both FME and ArcGIS Online, which is probably one of the reasons why 2.0 has been launched.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all done through REST API. So the authentication is handled by FME. You create the web connection, which essentially is like creating your pipe to ArcGIS. We make use of that web connection to retrieve everything, do the clever stuff to make it usable, and then we're keeping Ripple up to date in sync with ArcGIS. So we're sort of forecasting kind of at least a couple of updates a year to make sure that there's no compatibility issues.
Lovely. And John came in just to say that you can click into feature services to see the split, and yeah, happy to kind of show you.
Okay, cool. Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
that'd be very handy.
Yeah, he's nice to you. He makes fun of me, but he's nice to you. That's brilliant. And we've 1 minute to go, and I can't see any more questions there. And I really do want to be respectful of time. I've been on the other side of all of these webinars before, so I really want to be respectful of your time. obviously everybody on the call knows who I am and Kieran. So yeah, if you want a specific demo or if you have more questions, you can reach out to us. I think we've got a good few POCs running in a lot of kind of local authorities. We've already maybe 6 or 7 customers in Ireland, and it's only a couple of months old. So everything from utilities to councils. So it's been really, really popular, and I guess it's just in terms of the time it gives back GIS administrators to be able to kind of understand the landscape of not just ArcGIS, but also on the FME side. So yeah, listen, I hope you found it really, really useful. If you've got questions, you can reach out to myself directly, and we'll try to get back to you. And yeah, thanks for your time. And Kieran, thanks for your time. Some incredible work there. You should be very proud of what you've built there.
Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it. And thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks for hosting us. Appreciate it, Garrett.
No problems anytime. Thank you. Bye, everyone.